Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast, Our New Narrative, and today is July 7th, 2020, and today we're going to do part 3 out of 4, and I guess a series I'm calling African Americans, Socialist or Capitalist, and what I'm using for a platform for this discussion, conversation, monologue, whatever, is a conversation between several African Americans hosted by another YouTuber. So if you're coming to this for the first time, make sure you check out parts 1 and 2. I'll put this in a playlist as soon as all 4 are put up. But I want to ask you again to like, share, and subscribe. Definitely share if you find the content interesting, thought-provoking. And definitely let me know what you think in the comments. And because this portion of the video that I'm showing is a little bit longer, I'm gonna dive right into it. And I'm gonna try and keep my 2 cents to a minimum. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. And again, this is not to make light of the issues presented or to present the people speaking in a bad light. This is just to give a different perspective on some prevailing thoughts in the African American community and the American community in general.
Doing things right as a culture to change the narrative of our finances, of our children?
I can only answer that as an individual and to see what we and my wife also try to do and spread, right? I can't save the world. Yeah. I can save the people that watch me. I can save the people that touch me. I can save the people that work for me. I do my best, right? I just look at it as you have to be that beacon, right? You got to be that shining light to change everything around you. Be that leading example.
But I don't think that's anything new under the sun, what you're saying.
No, it's not new.
I have plenty of examples in my life of people who stuck their foot in the door so that I could pass through.
That's not always out the way we do things, though.
I have a dream.
I think there's a bigger majority of us that are doing that for one another than we are willing to shout from the mountaintops about, who did something for me. And I think there are plenty of people who worked for that on our behalf to make a way for me.
So let me ask you guys a question. And like you guys say, like if we're doing the right thing as a culture, do you guys think as the Black community, we always do too much kind of self-promotion and buying flashy things and doing all the stuff that negatively stereotype for us? But I mean, you got Jordans on right now. You look at the Jewish legacy, they're another historically oppressed people, but their type of lineage, like, hey, we're gonna save a lot of money and we're gonna pass it on to our generation. So do you think we are progressing in the right way?
I think what our culture is doing right is that we've always been able to take our pain and channel it into expression. Our culture is at the top of every industry. Our culture is manufactured, marketed, and sold at the top of every industry. We are at the top of music. Black culture is pop culture. We've always been able to take our pain and channel it into art, into expression, and to even, you could give Black people the worst part of anything and they'll find a way to make it amazing. I think it goes back to her point about ownership. We don't own the culture that we create. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the issue. Yeah. But what we are doing right is that we always have the most creative, most artistic, most true expression of whatever industry we're in. And the issue is that we don't own it. We're not the ones signing the checks. Mm-hmm. So that goes back into your point, where because we're not the one signing the checks, it goes to her point where we're trying to look like the one who's signing the checks, even though we're not. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to have the symbols of success without actually being successful. Mm-hmm. And that's what the Jewish community has been able to do. They own things, so they don't have time to look like they own it because they actually own it. Mm-hmm. And I think, but I do want to give us credit to answer your question, what are we doing right? We are the needle of culture, period.
We're the
on Earth. And that's something I feel like we're doing right. Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of issues. I mean, I could spend 4 hours on just the first 3 minutes of this, but I'll try and keep it brief. So the first issue to me is the most important, I believe, one of the most important is the issue that the brother in the front row with the cap on states that he hasn't experienced Black folks helping other Black people. And that's, I guess you could say, the crab in the barrel mentality. And I think a lot of people in and outside of the Black community can attest to that. I mean, sometimes you just feel like every time you're trying to get ahead, there's somebody in your community, your family, your group of friends that's trying to hold you back. Now, that's on the individual level, but on the group level, as a whole, do Black Americans keep other Black Americans down? I'm going to say no. I believe we definitely cheer for each other. I think the main, if you want to call it, problem is what we're cheering about, which leads into this looking successful instead of being successful. We're cheering on, or we are encouraging people to live beyond their means, drive cars they can't afford, you wear jewelry you can't afford. And like the other brother in the front row was saying, like, the Jewish people similarly have been historically oppressed, but instead of looking about it, they are about it. So they own things. And I think the path to ownership is a shift in the culture, the predominant African-American culture, which at the start of this series and in the title has something to do with capitalists versus socialists. So I believe that the majority of African-Americans are socialists, or our culture has been, I guess, transmorphed into being synonymous with socialism instead of what it used to be back right after the Civil War, which was mainly, capitalist, individual liberty, individual responsibility. You got a whole bunch of newly freed people not knowing what that even meant. I love, like, if anyone out there has ever read Gone with the Wind, not watched the movie, but actually read the book, Mammy, the famous character, the Black maid, the woman won Academy Award, the Oscar for her portrayal of Mammy. Anyway, she said this repeatedly in the book: I don't know nothing about this freedom. I don't want nothing to do with this freedom. Like, a lot of, slaves at the time just had no idea of what it meant to be individually responsible for your own self, right? You make a bad decision, you get a bad outcome, it's solely on you. And after generations and centuries of being solely dependent on an overseer or a master, a lot of African Americans didn't know what that even meant. And now I think their descendants, myself included, have grown up in a culture that is kind of still doesn't know, like, what that means to be totally free, independent, meaning you can't or you shouldn't look externally for your happiness, your well-being. This is all on you. So I'll let them continue. But I wanted to point that out.
That's something
I think you both brought up a point, though, that further speaks to our internal oppression, because I only hear other Black people say things about us wearing Jordans and, we're driving this. You don't say that to your neighbor. You don't know how much he paid for, whatever shoes he wears.
I actually got these for free. These were a gift. I was just
I ain't buying that. It's something that's said all the time. It's something that's said all the time, and even myself, I've caught myself becoming like, that's an internal thing, because your counterpart that does not look like you might put on a pair of $250 shoes and not think anything about it.
But isn't it crazy though? Like, that's a great point, because isn't it crazy? Like, you look at a Black person that
dresses really well, or they come out of like a Mercedes or something, my mind automatically goes to like, dang, like, how do you get that?
But why?
To your point. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's like,
I feel like you know why. I feel like you know why.
It's about
but it's like,
internal oppression.
but then if a white person walks out,
institutionalized
It's
the
the
thing
internal
and
oppression.
always say what they expect you to be. And it's sad. You know, I was talking to the young brothers, you know, why do you mean mug each other when you're walking towards each other, coming down the block? You're in the mall. Why don't you say, hey, peace, brother, how you doing? Yeah. Why is it always, hey, how you doing? That's how a relationship starts. Yeah. That's how we break down that mechanism of hatred amongst us. Yeah. Why are these brothers killing each other? They are trained to hate each other. First they're trained to hate.
I think that depends on where you are.
It depends where you are.
I've been in several white spaces where if I walk in and there's another black person anywhere with that eye view, you almost like you know? So I don't see the mean mugging thing. Like if I'm in a white space, even among black men, I see black men dap each other up in a mall because they pass each other and they see they're the only ones around. And they will speak to each other. They will embrace each other.
I haven't seen that. I'm sorry, but
man,
I appreciate.
Really?
I haven't seen that. I'm a grown man now. I'm talking about years later. I'm a grown man. I don't have the issues now. Every brother that comes towards me is, how you doing, brother? How you doing, young man?
I got to agree with my man here. Growing up in Detroit, man, you could not go into the mall and make eye contact with people. You just couldn't do it. You just fight break out. And I didn't realize that. You just grow up in that environment. I realized that when I went to North Carolina. And if any North Carolinians out there, you know how friendly North Carolinians can be. So I'm in a little mall in North Carolina or just walking down the street or walking on campus and people like, hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? From way out of nowhere. I don't know who these people are. You know, I'm in a mall, people just eyeing me, like eyeballing me. And I'm like looking away because I'm used to being in Detroit because you can't, you know, you can do that. Now, I'm older now, just like my man here. Sure, that's not a problem. And I'm sure that a lot of that had to do with the era that I was living in. So I don't know for sure because I haven't lived in Detroit for a few decades now, but I'm pretty sure, I don't know. I mean, you can let me know if anybody in Detroit sees this. You walking in the mall, can you make eye contact or are you still asking for a fight? I talked to some friends of mine who are police officers, and they told me that most of the bad apples are either in jail or they've been killed. So the generation that's growing up in Detroit now is a lot. There's a lot more peace amongst them than it was when I was growing up there.
Yeah. I'm talking about the young kids, right? That are walking around each other and not understanding who the other person is.
I really feel like Black people root for each other. I really do.
I believe that too.
I mean, man, you look on TV and you watching bowling or something on ESPN, like, I'm sorry, I'm going for the one black dude that's out there.
Everybody roots for the black quarterback.
I'm voting. I want him. Like, I want him to win it. I want him to be successful in anything that he does.
Exactly.
But would you, and I'm just devil's advocate because I'm with you. Would you support the black person who's starting the first black bowling league?
Yeah.
Because that's the difference.
I would try to learn how
to
bowl.
That's the difference is that all of these industries that we're supporting, we don't own the other.
Exactly.
Like we push the needle in billion-dollar industries and don't. You talk about head coaches. Mm-hmm. There's one black NBA owner. We run the NBA, but there's one owner. Mm-hmm. Like if a black league started today, would you watch it? That's the real question.
Mm-hmm. And do we support our black schools?
We support Nice Q. Come on.
So here's again, if you watch any of my videos, I'm always go back to this quote by concerning the conversation between President Andrew Johnson, who became president right after the Civil War, head of the Democratic Party. A conversation between him and the Postmaster General Montgomery Blair stated that since the Civil War is over, the key to politics is no longer slavery, which just means, you know, if you're pro-slavery, that's too bad. If you're anti-slavery, okay, there is no slavery, so what? So in order for that political party basically to stay relevant, they concluded that it's not about slavery anymore, it's about race. And so race has been injected into every political, I guess, every chance that every chance to put race into politics is pushed into politics. And that's coming from 1865 up until today. And you can really see it today with identity politics and blah, blah, blah. With that said, that's the background to what I'm about to say. When you hear people say support Black businesses or Blacks don't support Black businesses, would you, like the young man said in the front, would you, you'll support a Black bowler, but would you support a Black business owner who's starting a Black bowling league? The reason why this frame of mind and this thought fails in America is because, one, it's a heterogeneous country. Now, if this was Japan, that'd be easy. Would you support a Japanese company if you were Japanese? Yeah. But the second and main reason it fails is because this is supposed to be a free market capitalist society. And that is based on individualism, right? And so when you think of, will you support a Black business, Black automatically puts you in the frame of mind of a group, which puts you into socialism. And as I talked about in the last video, that puts you under the umbrella of collectivism. So collectivism, you get socialism. Under that, you get racism. But under capitalism, individualism, individual responsibility, individual freedom. So if you want to support a Black man, if you want to support a business owner starting a bowling league and he happens to be Black, that's one thing. If you want to support a Black person who wants to start a bowling league because he is Black, that's different. And that's a socialist mindset compared to a capitalist mindset.
Y'all was calling out Jordans, and y'all know I'm a money guy. So studies are showing that by 2054, the average African American will have zero to negative wealth, when the average Caucasian will have $150,000 or more. Okay.
Yeah.
So if studies are showing that we will have zero to negative wealth, but we look like wealth, where are we messing up at? What is the problem?
Ownership of your own, and ownership in helping people have ownership. There's got to be more teachers out there. There's got to be more teachers and more examples, right, of ownership and what it looks like, what it truly looks like, right? Because like you said, you can have a company, there can be a bunch of Black people running around the stage and running around the courts, but if you don't own nothing, but everybody else got a Benz on the court,
exactly.
Right? The owner might have nothing but a beat up wagon, but he's a billionaire. But it's teaching, right? You have to be that teacher, that example.
But I guess my question is, ownership doesn't stop you from saving what your income is. We're not even saving what we're making.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And before he gets too far into that, now the statistic he gave, and I don't know where he got it from, I'm not gonna doubt it, about Blacks owning zero, and the average Black person owning zero wealth and the average white person owning 150-something thousand. Now your averages, they can be skewed because the top, 5 richest people in the world, I'm pretty sure 2 or 3 of them are Americans, right? So, and you get, with that said, I believe the medium between Blacks in America, if you take out the outliers, are going to be a little closer because Americans in general don't save anything, right? 70% of our economy is based on consumption. And so piggybacking on what my man in the front row said is about ownership. That is true, but everyone knows that. Like this, I'm pretty sure he didn't come down from Mount Sinai with 2 tablets and on one of those tablets it said ownership, right? No, everyone knows ownership is the key. Everyone should know or does know that, yeah, you are wearing Nikes, you're wearing Jordans, but you're not profiting off of that unless you're a stockholder in Nike, right? So with that said, why is ownership such a difficult thing? And I believe that goes back to what we value as a culture, a subculture inside a bigger culture. The overall American culture values consumption over production, and I talked about this in the previous video. And in our subculture, it's the bling, you know, that Maybach lifestyle. I always say I want that Mike Brady lifestyle, where Mike Brady or the Brady Bunch, where you can get one income to support a wife or a partner, a living maid, and 6 kids in a house that you built and designed and built in Southern California. One income, an architect. He didn't even own the firm. So that's what, and how do you get that, or how do we lose that? That go, you know, that lifestyle, I'm trying to say too much here. Basically, how do we lose that lifestyle? You have to look into the purchasing power of our dollar. Going back to this conversation, ownership. Everyone knows it's about ownership, but it's very hard for that to be the prevailing value in a community when the outside community and the inside community values consumption only. So, give an example. If African-American women, now I'm not blaming anybody, I'm just painting a picture. If African-American women were like, you know what, I don't care how many pairs of Jordans he got, I don't care what type of car he drives, I'm trying to figure out what type of future he's going to have. Like, is he about owning a business, or is he about working for somebody else? Is he about trying to go through trials and tribulations, or is he about the short game, right? How many men do you think will be walking around with Jordans, and how many men do you think will be doing apprenticeships in the library half the time? You know, it's just our values, what motivates us, and things like that. And you can flip it. If in today's economy you need 2 incomes or 4, and if dudes were like, you know, I don't care how good she looked, what type of badunkadunk she got, or you know how her hair is, if she ain't about helping us, you know, create something that we own, I don't want nothing to do with it. That'll just shift the values in our culture. Now, how come that's so hard to do? Well, you have internal pressures from the Black community who, you know, if you don't have on any fresh clothes or your fresh jeans, fresh shoes, then you get ostracized by your friends and your outside and your school buddies, mates, whatever, classmates. And then you got outside America doing the same thing. We only value people with Mercedes and Rolls Royces, no matter what they did to get it.
So studies show that the average Caucasian drives a Ford F-150. Then the average African-American who makes in between $50,000 and $60,000 drives a Mercedes. So I guess my question is for us.
Now, I'll do this segment, but I talk about it in my book. It's the minus $50 million phenomenon. And in short, someone did a survey back in like the late 80s about when they asked white people how much it would cost them to change places with African American. It was like either $1 million a year or $50 million in total, right? And so that study was to show what a disadvantage African Americans had in America, right? What another disadvantage. But what I did was show how we feel right out the gate. Like we're not even at 0. We're at a negative 50 million. And how are you gonna make up a negative 50 million? Well, you can't really, so you try and look like you got 50 million, right? So that's a real short version of what I think. Well, that's a real short version of a bigger topic, but it addresses the issue he just brought forth about the F-150 versus the Mercedes.
While yes, we don't own a lot, with the income that we do have, why is it that in the next 20 years, we will not have wealth?
I mean, Black people, it just goes back to the fact that Black people rather look like they have money than actually have money. And if you want to,
I don't want to look
now
like
listen. Now listen. I say that to say this. Now look, listen. I say that to say this. Look at Jay-Z. Let's look at Jay-Z.
Turn my chair around on this one, brother.
Let's look at Jay-Z real quick. This and I want to bring, and I was gonna bring it up with an example.
I'm listening. Come on, brother.
Jay-Z, when he first got into the rap game, and you can look at yourself on the internet. Man was worth, I think, like,
I was there, so I'm
it was worth about $100,000.
I just shared that. I shared that 2 days ago.
Chain, I don't know how much money and jewelry he had on him. Jay-Z worth a bill was wearing just
a black t-shirt
and all that. Like that. So that's the point.
So that kind of goes to my point. When Jay-Z first came on the scene, before anybody knew who he was, like myself, you know, you don't notice in your head, but you don't perceive yourself as being negative $50 million. But that's the sensation you have in America, is that you're less than your white counterpart or Asian counterpart. And this researcher equated that to basically negative $50 million. Well, $50 million. I equated it to negative $50 million. And once a person gets to the point where they're worth, where they perceive themselves as being worth zero, get yourself out of the black, out of the red, and now you're in the black. So you're at 0, or you're at 100, or you're at 1,000, or you're at 100,000, or you're at 1,000,000, or in Jay-Z's case, 1 billion. There's no need to be flashy. You don't feel like you're negative $50 million. You feel great. And although I'm not worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but just going to Japan, and like I say this all the time, my best day in Japan, my worst day in Japan was better than my best day in America. And the reason why was because I didn't have that negative $50 million price tag on me, right? Everywhere I went was positive. Not everyone experienced life like I did in Japan. I think it was a fairly unique experience. But that experience led me in part to you, to let me know that, hey, although I'm Andre in America and Andre in Japan, is definitely a different outlook on life, a different feeling. And basically, I was perceived as more valuable in Japan than I was in America. And if all things being equal, if you put me next to a white American, there was more interest in me than the more common white American. I was more of a novelty, so there was just more interest there. But I'll let them go because we're only halfway through.
When I'm trying, that's deceptive. That's deceptive. That's deceptive. It's not gonna work. I understand that.
Deceptive. I guarantee you. I guarantee you that he only had almost 500K.
But I'm just saying, like the flashiness, like the fact that we feel like we gotta, wear all the chains, the grills, all this stuff to show that you have money and have wealth.
When a brother used to get a dime, he'll go out and get a flashy suit and take his old lady out to the club. I mean, that's just what it was.
Yeah.
If you don't make a lot of money, if you don't have a lot, when you get that little check, you're going to go out there and try to do what you can do and stretch it and try to have a good time and show people, hey, I got a job. This is what I'm doing.
Okay, so why do we have to feel like we have to show people that? Because to his point, he was asking about saving, right?
It's a mentality shift.
I agree.
The thing that's coming to my head goes down to fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Where did that even come from?
No idea.
And if you could trace where fake it till you make it even came from, and realize the mentality that even is, that maybe you wouldn't even do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what it all boils down to. We have been brainwashed into believing that we have to look a certain part to be allowed to come into the conversing and be inside of the room.
And be accepted.
Yeah. But if everything that we've said is true,
yeah.
If everything, all things are being equal, are true, then we have a right to be in the room anyway.
Regardless.
Exactly. And I think that's...
So, but that's us saying that about us. Mm-hmm. I have to dress conservatively at work. I have to wear business suits. I have to have my nails a certain way, my hair a certain way. On the weekend, I wear a baseball cap turned backwards. sweatsuits, Jordans. You know, and I'm perceived very different. It's night and day. Yeah. I can go to Nordstrom's on the weekend, just killing time. And if I'm dressed in my weekend attire, I'm perceived a certain way. Exactly. I can go to Nordstrom's after work, dressed like I'm dressed now after work. I'm perceived a completely different way. I'm the same person.
100%.
It doesn't, so I get that having to do what you have to do. That's almost a work uniform. You got to do that. You work at Chick-fil-A, you got to wear a red polo. Yeah. You know, that's a work uniform. It does not have to be that way. And that's why I said earlier that victimization can come in many different forms. And to his point, we kind of learn to deal with it. We learn to deal with it. You know, I've been followed around the store and I stopped and turned around. And I said, I'm not going to put anything in here in my Tory Burch bag. And I look at her. You know, because it's like, I'm not going to steal anything. You know, you're perceiving me on the outward appearance just because I'm not dressed a certain way, and it's unfair. You know, and it's really unfair.
Yeah. Studies are showing that nearly 50% of us cannot afford to pay cash for a $400 emergency. But yet, I guarantee the same person owns two.
No, he said us. He left off the A, because that's not a black statistic. That's an American statistic. And it's mind-blowing. And it should scare the living daylights out of everybody who's currently under this COVID thing. If you're watching this video, you may have been laid off, or your company is shutting down or shut down. And this is America, not just Black America. And again, I'm going to say the Black American community is constantly, in my opinion, the canary in America's coal mine. If you look at us, the Black American community, you gradually see America shifting toward that. And it's not a shift toward Black culture. It's a shift towards socialist values and socialist policies that African Americans have unwittingly embraced as African American culture.
Two pair of Jordans. That is worth $500.
Not all the time.
Is it also make a difference that, I mean, we get paid, Black people in general, we get paid about 25% less for the same position as a white male, as a white counterpart. That has to be, like, it's hard to bridge that gap.
Yeah, but he just finished saying we were the needle of the culture, so we set that.
Now, statistics like what he just said, African Americans made 25% less for the average, for the same position. You have to put perspective on that, because I hear the same thing about women to men and things like that. You have to think about the starting point, and I'll try and make this brief. If you have a position for an analyst, just healthcare analyst position where you need a college degree, right? You get, let's say, 2 applicants. One has a degree in economics, the other has a degree in economics. Should be fine. I mean, that indicates to the hiring manager or the recruiter that this person, at least on paper, can do the job, right? But then you look at, so how do you decide from there? Where do you go? Well, the first thing a recruiter does is say, well, how valuable is the degree that person has? Not how much that person paid for the degree, because that person could have very well been on scholarship. But if let's say the person went to Harvard and got a degree in economics. The other person got a degree from San Jose State University, right? Well, the person from Harvard is going to be more marketable and most likely have more options or even more offers by the time the company decides to give that Harvard grad an offer, right? So in order for the company to hire the Harvard grad, they can't offer him something they offer anybody else that can do the job. They got to offer him more. So that person will start off at a higher pay scale than someone who went to San Jose State. That doesn't matter if that person is Black or white. If that person is Black, I can almost guarantee you the Black Harvard grad with a degree in economics is going to get paid considerably more than a white applicant from San Jose State University, just simply because of the rarity of an African American with a degree from Harvard And there's this big push to get minorities into the workforce, I've seen it happen. I've experienced it, a quota system at big tech companies for minorities, and So when we hear statistics like women make half as much as men, or blacks make a quarter as much as whites, you gotta put that into some type of perspective, the starting off point. And before they even get to college, the true starting off point between men and women is in the home. So, you know, when I was growing up, I'm not a woman, but my female counterparts, I'm pretty sure they never had the conversation of, look, Jane, make sure you do well in school, study like math and science, because your husband is going to have to rely on you for your income, right? I mean, that's just not the conversation women had. And so, but it was a conversation men had. So when they get to the workforce, the starting gate, they're in a better position, right? Now, in 2020, if you got a daughter, you better have that conversation.
We set the culture. Yeah, we buy Jordan, but the white guy owns Michael Jordan. Like, he owns the Jordan brand, so I can catch up to that. No, I was saying we get paid 25% less for doing the exact same job.
But if our spending habits are the way that they are, what does it matter what you're getting paid?
Exactly. That's
was
the
your
point.
point.
That's the point.
It really doesn't matter.
The money we're making.
It don't matter.
Being fiscally, financially responsible and understanding what that actually means is huge, right? If you're not taught it, don't understand it, didn't go to school for it, you'll never know it. So to your point, and you're going to be in a negative, not have money in comparison in 2054, being fiscally irresponsible, right? Not knowing how to invest properly, not knowing what to do with that dollar that you got. You know, I was kind of raised when I was a youngster, and I started in the cooking industry. I was raised by an Italian family. And the gentleman always told me, you know, the father always told me, you take that dollar, you spit on it. You put it in the bank and don't look at it until you get enough to invest it, reinvest it. Don't put it in your pocket. If you walk around in your pocket, you're going to spend it. Mm-hmm. That was something he always told me as a youngster, right? And then come from my father. It came from the gentleman I worked for. Wow.
Today, gold and silver. Buy gold and silver. Physical gold and silver. Put it in your bank, in your house, your vault, the safe, whatever you want to call it. Put it under your pillow. Gold and silver. Go get it.
Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not saying it was a black thing. I'm not saying it was a white thing or anything, but it was something I just learned from him. And, you know, like that, I think that, you know, it starts at home. You know, the reason why it starts at home, we have to know about what to do with that dollar. If you don't know what to do with the dollar just going to leave your pocket.
And I think those are just a bunch of personal decisions that you have to make as a person yourself. You have to decide.
And that's not black or white.
Yeah, that's not black or white. I think it's a decision, even if you are black, even if you are oppressed, even if you have been victimized. I think you still have to make a decision. You know, we talk about this often. We drive what we drive by choice. We could go get nicer, newer cars, but we've made a mature decision to not feel intimidated when you meet your friends for lunch and everybody's jumping out of a new car and yours is 15 years old. You know, we made a choice not to be affected by that. We made a choice to think, okay, if we decide to get married, if we don't have this amount of money in the bank, why would we spend that to throw a celebration? We're not gonna, you know, you have to have those conversations as individuals, and then you make those decisions as families. And you know, I heard someone say not too long ago, you're born looking like your dad, you die looking like your decisions.
Damn, man, come on. That is the... Hey, you born looking like your dad, you die looking like your decisions. I hope that somebody put that on a t-shirt so I can wear it, like this one, hindsight 2020. It's about, and they kept saying it's about your personal decisions. So for the most part, this group seems like a very nice group of people, regardless of race. And I only have issue with basically two of them, and it's basically just they are more inclined towards socialism than capitalism. But for the most part, other than those two, I'm pretty sure most people watching this video wouldn't mind having them as neighbors. So what happens when you get individual black people in groups like this and the outcome is Black Lives Matter? I'm saying, based on what, you know, Andrew Johnson said back in the day, and what politicians have been doing, and race hustlers and poverty pimps, right? You need that black vote. You need that negative narrative, that victimization narrative to push these otherwise wise, nice people into voting for a protector, right? But if you get these people to see that, I think you will get more and more African Americans with a collectivist mindset, capitalistic mindset, with individual freedom and individual responsibility on the mind instead of group victimization. Two things that happen. You'll get more affluent Black communities that other people will want to move into. And two, you will get certain political parties vanishing.
So how you leave this earth is going to be just how you made decisions.
I'm going to use that one.
Yeah, I'm going to use that as well.
I'm taking that one.
That's real good. That was good.
So as how do we help our culture make better decisions with the income that they do have?
So first, I said this in this last video, our culture. First, we need to figure out what our culture is and where it originated from, and how certain aspects of that our culture can be disposed of, because a lot of our culture, like 90% of it, we borrowed from somebody else. And the same people that we borrowed it from, the successful ones, tossed a lot of those attributes to the side and exchanged them for capitalistic values, individual freedom, and responsibility, things of that nature. I'm rushing just so I can get through this, but
because you made a valid point, we will make less. That's just proven across the table. We cannot control that as of right now. But with the income that we have, I'm a saved man. So flipping over to the spiritual side, how do we become good stewards of the resources that God has given us?
We live on less than we make. We lead by example. We open the door for transparency to allow other people to see where we actually are, instead of telling them what we want them to believe or what we fantasize to be the truth. We actually show them and live out for them by example what it is that they are supposed to do. When my daughter turned 16 years old, I began to prepare her to be a homeowner by the time she was 21. I began to do things that I knew would position her to do that. So I led her by example. I didn't just talk about what I wanted to be. I was about what I wanted her to be. And I think that's what we do. We're so busy not wanting to tell our children, oh, mom was a hoe back in the day, but she learned better than that. You know, they can see, they're not blind. You know, the bottom line is that we live by example in front of our children, whatever.
Now, the mom was a whole comment. I love that she said it. I don't know if this applies to her or not, but I always say, you can't choose how you're born, but you can choose how you live, and it ain't over until it's over. So if you a hoe today, you can make up your mind tomorrow, stop being a hoe, right? I'm sorry, but I just had to throw that in there. But anyway, it ain't over until it's over. So one thing I can't stand about this, victimization narrative is this, well, the white man makes such and such more than we do, or, it's not fair because the white man had all these advantages, da-da-da-da-da. It ain't over yet. Keep trying. Just keep trying. That's what life is about. You set a goal, you try and reach it. If you fail, hopefully you have peers and family that'll be a cushion for you to help you up. Not the government, but friends and family, right? To help you reach your goals. Your goals are your goals. And what some other wise person said, don't judge yourself by someone else's today. Judge yourself by your yesterday. Are you better today than you were yesterday? That's how you should live your life, and let them keep going.
No matter what we say, they see what we do. And I think that's the way we change it.
Okay, I will add something here. Well, when you were talking about that, the analogy of like when you're on an airplane and the oxygen mask analogy, how you have to put the mask on yourself first to be able to even help the person put on their mask. To me, I'm always big about like, be the very thing that you want to attract, and then you can duplicate yourself. Because if you're trying to duplicate something or trying to pour into somebody else and you're not even taking care of yourself, that's kind of hard to do that. And then the quote that I love is, know what you know and know who don't, like, know what you know and, wait, how's it say? Know what you know and know someone who doesn't know that you know what you know, and that's all you need to know. So whenever I don't know something, I don't care how dumb I look, I ask a whole lot of questions. And that's honestly how I've learned a lot of different things. Like, that's why I have to be quiet, because this is a different, like, so growing up Caribbean, like, we're always like, we've always been taught to just go after whatever it is and nothing can stop you. And that's kind of what I've experienced, but that's also because of how my parents like positioned us. Like, being in South Florida, we grew up in this place called Davie.
Sorry. So as you may, if you listen to my other videos, you may know that new immigrants from Africa, blacks from Caribbean, blacks from South America are outpacing everybody in America as far as education and income. They're still black, racism still exists, but they're kicking everybody's butt. Whites, Asians, everybody, right? So mentality, the black Caribbeans didn't come here to America to experience racism. They came here to experience capitalism, freedom.
It was a white community like that. They kind of paved the way for us so we didn't have to experience a lot of different things. So I always want to make sure that I understand and I can empathize with how my friends grew up and how other people's different experiences, because I can't necessarily speak on it the same way. You know, so it's kind of hard. That's why I'm just like, I'm kind of nervous because I don't know what I'm going to say in some situations. Because the nearest thing I got to, I guess, racism or like situation like that was my brother when he was working at Publix, and he was pushing the cart, and the young lady was just like, "Oh, mommy, his hands are dirty." And that's the closest we kind of got to it. You know, so it's very interesting hearing the different perspectives that are shared. And I'm kind of going off topic, but that's kind of what's going on in my mind. Like, this is some real stuff. Like, this is,
I think if you're going to flip it to a spiritual perspective, you're talking about being a good steward. If you only rely on this world system, then that'll be the results that you get. I believe that if we're going to on a spiritual lane, if y'all will go with me real quick, I believe that God will give each individual wisdom on how to handle their finances. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, "I'm the Lord your God," that teaches you to profit. Like, we need to be taught how to profit. And if your only teaching is based on this world system or your household, we're saying what the results are, that God gave Joseph a vision on how to multiply his resources in years of famine. That saving is not a world system. God told Joseph, yo, in these years of famine, take a portion of that to the side, and while everybody else starving, y'all gonna be good. You flip that to the New Testament, Jesus himself gave a parable where he said he gave one man 1 talent, another man 5, and another one 10, which shows me that no matter what situation you're in, wisdom can be applied. If you have less, the middle or upper class, the same wisdom can be applied, and you might not ever have as much as the man with 10 talents, but at the same time, you can still maximize your potential in whatever situation you're in. In that parable, the person who had the least, I would say, was lazy and just hit it and didn't trade, didn't invest, didn't multiply his resources. And Jesus caught that man lazy. So I think if you're dependent on this world system, if you're dependent on the government, if you're dependent on your black family's household to somehow miraculously understand financial literacy and teach it to you, then that's going to be the fruit that that's going to be the tree that you eat off. But I think God will give each individual wisdom. I think there are practical things in the Bible that can unlock spiritual resources. I think if you tithe, I think if you give to good causes, if you give to the needy, these are practical things that we think are so spiritual, but they're really simple to do. They're really, really simple things. And I think that people who do these things are generally more successful. And I think that's a key part of it that we haven't yet unlocked. And we're talking a lot about the world system and the government and racism. But I truly believe that God can supersede any system that we're currently living in. And that as a culture, man, I don't really want to go all the way here, but as a culture, I think we're taught in black churches to just pray and wait and believe for God to make something happen. But according to the parable
What
that
is faith without works is
Is
what?
dead.
But according to the parable that Jesus gave, that man who did that was lazy and slothful. That's what he called it. So I think even in our black churches, there's a loser's mentality at times.
Well, if you ever want to hear black victimization, go to a black church. And I read something that Frederick Douglass said, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but he basically said, I prayed on my knees for freedom for 20 years, and then one day I got up and ran to freedom. So that's all you need to know as far as I'm concerned. I try and keep religion out of this. There's enough politics involved. But that's my stance on being reliant on religion, on government. If it was good enough for Frederick Douglass, it's good enough for me.
As a culture, even in our churches, we're taught to be the borrower and not the lender. And it's the complete opposite of what was originally intended.
I was speaking at a HBCU. I won't say the name of the college. Kids came up to me and said, I cannot be financially successful compared to my white friends. Do we feel, as a culture, that African Americans, we can never be as successful financially as a Caucasian individual?
And what did I just say? New immigrants from Africa, Black Caribbeans, Blacks from South America are more successful than their white counterparts. But there's this narrative, this feeling within our community. It starts with that negative $50 million feeling that creeps on you when right around puberty, seriously, right around junior high, when you start to recognize the difference, that there is a meaning in the difference of being white and black. Yeah, it's that narrative. I'll keep saying it. It has done more damage to the black community than any Klansman could ever dream of.
It's a horrible way to think.
Yeah.
I
don't think anyone on this panel thinks.
I'm gonna leave it here and catch the last part 4. I'll try and remember to put his video in its entirety in the description. Be safe out there. Thanks for staying. This video's ran about 50-something minutes. If you're still sticking around, please like, share, and subscribe. Definitely share. And with that, have a good day. Stay safe. And see you next time.